morning. What a wonderful assembly and wonderful set of speakers this morning. There must be something about shared value that gives us hope. And what I'd like to do is actually, before I land on the ecosystem of shared value and collaboration, I'd like to retrace a little bit our work with my colleagues, Michael Porter, Mark Kramer. I've worked on all the articles with them since the beginning, co-authored the last ones. But before I go to the end point, really talk about what is our hope. What is the hopeful piece of this agenda that's carried us over the years and continues us to excite us and motivate us to keep on pushing this topic forward. Now, the first thing that gives us hope, and our speakers this morning framed this wonderfully, is that shared value is about strategy. And it's not about sharing the value created. And I will always say that is a good thing and a necessary thing to share the value created and to focus on the footprint of a company's activities. But that's by nature limited and diluted. Shared value is about making the societal needs the object of strategy, the object of value creation pursuit. And when that happens, you create the economic underpinning for progressing against the societal issues, and that inherently scales and inherently has impact. And that's the promise of shared value. We often talk about, basically every country has a similar picture, but you just look at the US and you say, how much revenue is in business? $16 trillion. How much revenue is in government? $3 trillion. And how much revenue is in the nonprofit sector? $1 trillion. And if you focus on the reallocation of what business creates value, reallocates to taxation, to government, and to nonprofit, we can achieve wonderful things with that $4 trillion. But what if we turn the $16 trillion, and that's what's happening, into a force of addressing all of the unmet needs which are listed here in those columns? And that is made possible, and it was wonderful to hear these stories this morning, it's made possible by that fundamental shift. By companies who are really shifting from what they do to why they do it. And this is not about a tagline, a purpose tagline. This is inherently about building that dual purpose in a company, of picking those issues which are the fundamental objectives, societal objectives of the firm, and doing that in a financially successful way. And that shift from thinking I'm a car maker to I'm driving zero emissions mobility in the world, or like a Nestle, I'm a food company, to thinking I'm a nutrition, health and wellness company. And all of those listed here is absolutely fundamental. It changes everything. It changes the nature of your activities in business. And we heard some of this already this morning, hearing about Discovery. When you are about zero emissions mobility, it's not about making cars. That's one piece, but it's about the infrastructure and network for storing energy. It's about policies that are going to be conducive to new modes of transportation. And you begin to see here my topic where I'm going to land. It's about an entire ecosystem that you need to think about as part of your strategy. So it fundamentally shifts the activities you're in. It shifts fundamentally the nature of competition. Think about Safaricom. We heard about it this morning. Safaricom worrying about healthcare. Insurers, Discovery, focusing on healthcare. So if you're in the healthcare industry, your competition is now coming from telcos, from insurers, from all sorts of places. Shared value shifts the nature of competition. And of course, and we heard some great comments of this morning, it shifts people. It shifts why you go into business, why you're excited to go to work every morning, and it shifts who wants to work with you. And trust in business has been a challenge, but a company authentically engaged in a purpose will find a whole bunch of new partners in its ecosystem to drive those changes and those business models. And so this is the wonderful evolution that we're seeing and we've been tracking, is that we begin to see companies more and more embracing this kind of pyramid thinking, and actually even some companies actually functioning with that as a framework. You've got your purpose, your fundamental reason for being. That drives actually every choice you make at every level of the company. The corporate strategy level is which businesses are we in? Which businesses should we perhaps divest? Which ones do we operate? Which ones do we need to acquire to fulfill our purpose? It trickles down to market, brand levels. If you're a brand, which products should I be pushing and developing? Which needs should these brands go after? If you're at the product level, we'll hear about is how should I reconceive those products? It drives every decision. One thing that shared value company do is to track and begin to think through how they're allocating, how they're making decisions at all levels, how they're allocating resources to fulfill both their purpose and their financial objectives. And it does also actually, let's never forget, that the CSR legacy continues to live and is important as part of this picture as the base. Purpose also helps you decide, where am I going to comply to laws and regulation, where am I going to voluntarily embrace new standards, and where do I need, because of the nature of my purpose and my industry, do I need to be a norms leader on setting new standards that perhaps at this level are not necessarily creating a competitive advantage, which is created in the middle level. The second thing that's so hopeful about shared value is it's fundamentally about innovation. We heard from Safaricom about this. But it's a different kind of innovation. This is about breaking the frontier of market failures. This is not about innovating in conventional markets. I recently had a conversation with another CEO in an insurance company who said, you know what, if we look at our entire R&D budget, what it's doing mostly is upgrading, improving our existing business model. It's not going into new places. It's not creating the new business models that we need to do to fulfill our emerging purpose. And you're probably all familiar with this from the 2011 article, this is how innovation and where innovation happens fundamentally in shared value. Around reconceiving products and services. Wanted to talk about the amazing example of Discovery. I think that's done, check. We're about to come out, thanks in part to Discovery, in 2 weeks with a new report on ensuring shared value. There are multiple companies around the world who are breaking the boundaries of rethinking their business models and products to do this. Bima, for example, a startup that came out of Scandinavia and the UK, operating now has just in 3-4 years, reaching 27 million customers in countries like Ghana with basic healthcare insurance, leveraging technology, leveraging mobile platforms, mobilizing a local sales force to explain to people and bring up to 80% of these 27 million have never had health insurance before. We've got fundamental, wonderful innovation going on there. The second part of shared value innovation is how you operate in your value chain. This is about driving productivity in your value chain, resource productivity, or labor productivity. Wonderful examples from Anglo American, one of the first companies to provide ART treatment for its workforce, one of the largest HIV AIDS program now in the world, started because of a concern for the workforce health. And if the workforce is not healthy and not strong, how are we going to operate successful mine? Fundamentally about driving labor and resource productivity. And third, it's about innovating about how you evolve, shape your ecosystem, your context, so you release the constraints to growth to those business models. And that's where we've gotten. We've actually realized more and more that it's not just about corporate strategy, and it's not just about allocating resources to fulfill the purpose to those breakthrough models and innovations. It's actually about dealing with all of those 3 layers and means of creating shared value. You see it in this wedge. The product innovation, the business model innovation, together with the company value chain, is just the beginning of this proposition. And we saw that with the Discovery example, that there are actually a whole lot of other layers to successful executions of these models. The next model is, do we have the supply or distribution conditions that enable us to deliver our behavioral change model, for example? Well, we actually do need the retailers to go with us with the food baskets, and we need the fitness and the gyms to be part of our proposition. And very strikingly, we heard also, actually we do need changes in the rules, in the policy context. Sometimes these are informal rules, sometimes they're formal rules. And we heard about the regulatory constraints here to Discovery Vitality growing its model into population groups that they would like to seek to reach as well. And of course, we heard about the behavioral components. We see this kind of structure and wedge in every single shared value strategy. In healthcare, it's not about having, in diabetes, just insulin, right? If there's no proper diagnostic, no treatment, proper care in the health system, if there's no proper reimbursement or policy context around insurance, then again, those companies are not going to be successful. In educational products like Pearson, having shifted its purpose from being a publisher of educational books to thinking of its purpose as driving educational outcomes. When you shift your purpose from that, you begin to understand that the entire educational system is going to be essential to you actually driving your proposition. This we see over and over again. Now, the tremendous challenge, and you see this on the side of this wedge, is that actually business doesn't have that much legitimacy to go beyond its operation. What legitimacy does business have to influence policy? What does legitimacy to influence behavior? Are we trusting companies who are trying to change our behaviors and influence how we think about our health, our education, even how we farm our farms? And certainly, the other constraint is how can we possibly, as single innovator, business model innovators, fund and support the cost and the process of transforming all of this? Well, companies are cracking the code on this. And one example, a perfect, imperfect example, like all of them, is Yara's leadership with fertilizer business in Tanzania as one example. Now, if you're one of the leading fertilizer company like Yara, and you're looking at Africa as this wonderful growth opportunity, so much potential in agricultural development, but you're faced with constraints like in Tanzania, where the ports is not functioning, where there's corruption in the port, where there's no roads to take your fertilizer up country, where up country there's no agro dealership who are able to actually do what Yara does best, which is to customize and tailor its fertilizer to the local soil condition. If the farmers are not getting the extension service that they need to adopt their farming practices, and partially because they mistrust a legacy of nationalization of the farming system and actually mistrust cooperatives, how do we begin to rebuild that trust? And what do we do with the fact that they don't have any transport to store first, storage of crop, and then to transport it to the ports to actually ship that? Then you have an entire failed ecosystem and you can't grow your market. Yara helped catalyze, along with 68 other companies, the national government of Tanzania, the Southern Agricultural Growth Corridor of Tanzania. Thinking about this as an entire ecosystem, committing $3 billion, Yara just invested $60 million of that, into addressing every single component of that ecosystem change. This work is still unfolding, still growing, facing some challenges, some successes, but Yara has already succeeded in growing its market share to 50% of the fertilizer market, grown its sales, the fastest growing sales country for Africa, for Yara, and profits in the region, much in line with its own share of investment in this process. Now, what's going on here is you've got an innovation, you need the ecosystem change. And the principles that we're seeing to apply this is how do you actually do this? And we've been learning from the collective impact progress of the social sector about what it takes to actually create that change. And collective impact is not about sort of let's bring everybody together, let's co-fund a program. Collective impact is about recognizing that the only way to change a complex problem is to engage actors, the systems actors, in recognizing jointly the failures of that system and developing together a common agenda, a strategy to intervene in that system to evolve it. But again, not to intervene it all the same way, to intervene it where each actor has the authority, the legitimacy, the experience to act in mutually reinforcing activities in the system. Collective impact is based on a principle of shared measurement, that all of the system actors engaged in collective impact will share the same information about what's working and what's not working, and will engage in continuous dialogue, bridging sometimes continuous challenges of mistrust based on the shared purpose of creating change, building on the innovations of business, the business model transformation, and creating the system around that will actually deliver that change at scale. Key component of collective impact is having a backbone organization. In the case of SATCOD, it's the SATCOD Secretariat. There has to be a central nervous place where that orchestration process happens. So that's what gives us hope in shared value. It's the fact that it's core to purpose and strategy. We're seeing entire firms committing their entire engine of the firm to the pursuit of societal objectives, allocating resources throughout the layers of the business, balancing carefully the short-term agenda of keeping a successful business alive with the long-term budget and resource allocation needed to develop innovative business models and to engage in the ecosystem's change together with others and in the backbone structures necessary for that ecosystem change to actually realize the full potential of their strategy using the collective impact principles. So that's my message in a nutshell. Thank you.